meetings live.
Okay, so welcome to this Cabinet panel on the environment. We've been conducted with members and officers and members of the public at various locations, communicating by audio and video and online. There's an opportunity for the public and press to listen to and view proceedings as well. And we've got some various contributions that we're going to hear later on. Before the meeting actually starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take a roll call to confirm that everyone who's supposed to be here is here and can be heard. Hello.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to do a quick roll call to see if our officers, members, as registered speakers and public attendees can hear, and we can hear them as well. So members first, have we got Steve Jarvis?
Yes.
Thank you. Have we got Amy Allen? Kathy Brownjohn? Dominic Griffiths? Chris Hinchcliffe?
Yes.
Thank you. David Levitt?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Gerald Morris? No. Louise Peace?
Yes, I'm here.
And for the officers tonight, do we have Georgina Chapman?
Present.
Thank you. And do we have Ellie Hollinsworth?
Yep.
Thank you. And on to the registered speakers. Do we have Tim Beach?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Joe Stack?
I'm here, yeah.
Thank you very much. Claire Carlaw?
Hi, yeah, here.
Thank you very much. And Sarah Perry?
Hi, yes, here.
Thank you. I'm just going to go on to the other public attendees just to check that they can hear and we can hear them. Have we got John Webb?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Roger Lovegrove?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Chili Chequin?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Have we got Richard Meredith Hardy? No. Claire Gooden? Kay King? Mark Wilkinson?
Hello.
Thank you very much. Pauline Ayres? Andy Ayres? Derek Hyde? Ian Brown?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. We've got Beryl Brown.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Have we got Annie Sander?
Yep.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sue Lyons? Julia Sananda? And have we got Christina from Baldock Beats Waste anywhere? No. Have you got anyone from the Royston Environmental Group? No. And anyone from the Nebworth Environmental Group? No. And do we have anyone else online that I haven't called out tonight?
Just to let you know, Councillor Allen has arrived.
Amazing. Thank you, Louis. Okay, I'll hand back to the chair.
Okay, thanks very much. We have apologies from Michael Muir, and Dominic Griffiths told me that he expected to be late. Are there any other apologies you've had, Eleanor?
No other apologies, Chair.
Are there any other apologies that anyone else has? No. Right, well, we'll press on then. So we've got the minutes of the meeting of the panel that was held on the 22nd of February. Are the members of the panel happy that they're an accurate record of the meeting? Yes? Okay. We accept those then. My script says we need a seconder for those, but
Happy to do.
jolly good. Okay. Do we all agree those? Okay, right. I will take absence of any objection as agreement. So, in accordance with the Council's policy, this meeting has been recorded and will be available on the Council's YouTube page as well as the Council's ModGov site. Members of the panel are reminded to make declaration of interest before an item. Details about that and the speaking rights are set out on the agenda under the Chair's announcements. And members and indeed everyone else is reminded that the Council has declared a climate emergency, which is a serious decision and means that as it's an emergency, all of us have to have it in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks. Other notifications of other business, there isn't any other business. So we can move straight on to the information note on the work programme and the action tracker. Georgina, over to you.
Thanks, Steve. So the information note highlights proposed items that are scheduled in the work programme for the panel for the 2023 to 2024 civic year. So the work programme aims to enable open discussion and can lead to recommendations to Cabinet or the relevant executive member or service director. So the proposals for this civic year are this meeting, 19th of July, set the work programme, and then water is the topic. The second meeting on the 27th of September 2023 will be on sustainable development. The third meeting on the 6th of December will be on waste, and then the fourth meeting will be on the 20th of March 2024, and that will be kind of a wrap up of the achievements. The policy team are currently reviewing the action tracker. We want to kind of improve its effectiveness and clarify the areas in which the council can actually kind of make an influence. Some of the actions on there have been on hold for a while, so we want to kind of review that with other officers and check that the stuff that is on there is stuff that the council can actually do. So we'll be bringing the updated action tracker before the panel at the September meeting to highlight any changes that we're kind of recommending making to that action plan. I will whiz through the updates on the council's kind of climate and sustainability work, because I'm conscious that we've got quite a full agenda. So contributions to the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. So for anyone that isn't aware of what that is, it's a partnership of all the councils in Hertfordshire and the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. They work across various priority areas such as water, biodiversity, carbon reduction, transport, climate adaptation and behaviour change, and they create strategic action plans for each of those areas. North Herts have been leading on creating the biodiversity strategic action plan, which was approved a couple of years ago, the first version of it, and now we've just been working with the biodiversity subgroup to review it, to take into account the actions to date and any changed context. I will be taking a revised version of that to the meeting of HCCSP tomorrow for approval, and then we're planning a larger revamp of that plan in 2024, and that will be to kind of coincide with the development of Hertfordshire's local nature recovery strategy, because we want those documents to sort of be in alignment with each other and be able to draw on each other. We're also preparing for a second round of the Solar Together scheme, so that will be open for registrations towards the end of August, and it will close for registrations towards the end of October. But we will be putting out some updates on that shortly. We're also working to compile a climate risk log, which is part of the HCCSP's adaptation work. So that will identify risks to council services and then eventually to the wider district from climate impacts, and look at kind of any mitigating actions that can be taken. We're working on the home upgrade grant, the round 2 of that grant, which is a grant to enable people to apply for retrofitting measures to help them save money on their energy bills, and ultimately to help them save carbon. This phase is available for off-gas properties and anyone whose property is rated EPC D, E, F or G and whose income is below £31,000 per year. So we've been doing some analysis to enable us to find out where the largest numbers of eligible homes are, so that we can target our marketing there. The wards that seem to have the largest numbers of eligible households are Hitchwood, Offa and Hoo, Ermine and Weston and Sandon. So our marketing will focus there initially, but there will also be some general promotion, because any eligible resident can sign up for the scheme. We have been recommencing our work on reviewing the Luton Airport expansion documents, so documents on various areas including climate resilience, green controlled growth, biodiversity, infrastructure and air quality. Are currently being reviewed by officers to kind of ascertain whether the previous concerns that we've raised have been taken into account. We are continuing to provide updates on our Climate Hive engagement page, so I can put a link to the chat in that after I've done this update. So that's an engagement platform where we can give regular updates to residents on work that's going on climate and environment and sustainability in the district, and people can sign up to get notified every time there's an update. I think earlier this afternoon we had 286 subscribers, and so far we've put out updates on bee corridors, wildflower areas, event updates, the eco festivals, and an update on green courses and modules, which was an action that we were given from this panel a while ago. And then we're continuing also to make sure that our climate and environment goals are aligned with our planning projects. So we're sitting on the Baldock expansion strategic project board and a monthly working group meeting to kind of ensure that sustainability elements are taken into account in that development. Just also to note, going back on the Solar Together point, I think Councillor Hinchcliffe asked me a question about ethical supply chains. At the last meeting, I did inquire about this with iChooser, and they said that they're monitoring the investigation into the allegations of forced labour in the global solar supply chain. They also say that they're a member of the industry body Solar Energy UK, and they're signed up to the UK Solar Energy Supply Chain Treatment, which commits to the development of industry-led traceability protocol. They're doing their best to minimise the risk of using components created in unethical situations, and they are actively discussing the components that are being used with all participating installers to make sure that nothing's coming from an unethical source. So do let me know if there's any further questions on that. I think that's the end of the information note. So if people are happy with the work programme for the year, then we can probably move on.
Okay. Are there any questions for Georgina? No? Okay. So the work programme, as we've set out, the first item is to talk about matters relating to water. Those who've been regular attenders at the panel will know that we have a subject for each panel meeting, which has ranged over carbon emissions, biodiversity, trees, food waste, and many other things as well. But this morning, sorry, not this morning, this evening, the objective is to talk about matters relating to water, both the supply of water and the disposal of water, and the issues that those things present for the environment in North Hertfordshire. So we have a number of presenters from Thames Water, Anglian Water and Affinity Water, and also from the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, who've been doing some work on chalk streams in the area. So we're going to start off with Tim Beach from Thames Water. So Tim, over to you.
Thank you. Remind me how long I've got. If that's
You've got 10 minutes.
okay, that's fine. I'm going to whiz through quickly then. How do I share screen? And someone needs to give me access to share.
Can you sort that out, or somebody else?
There we go.
You should have access now.
Yeah. Right. Hopefully you can see the presentation.
We can.
Brilliant. Okay. Firstly, thanks for inviting me along. I'm in our sustainability department, reporting into Rich Daylard, our sustainability director, who's on leave today, so I'm covering for him today. Quite a broad ask, but I'll try and cover off as much as I can in the time. Firstly, I think it's important to kind of go over the basics as to kind of what we do from a wastewater perspective, before we kind of talk in a bit more detail about the hows and whys. So just to get everyone on a level playing field, a typical treatment works. So this is Western. Flow arrives via gravity into an inlet works, or is pumped there. It's then take all the kind of niceties are taken away. So the wet wipes, the cotton buds, the sanitary products are all screened out in an inlet works. We then have primary settlement, which is really about slowing the flow down, settling it out, removing the solids, and kind of taking on the water element through to actual treatment. Treatment itself is kind of usually a biological process. So that's really where we try and encourage good biology and bacteria to treat the sewage. We then pass it on to settlement, slow it down once again, settle out any final solids before we then take a sample at a sample point, the final point of the process, where we will take official samples and provide them to the Environment Agency to ensure we're within standard. And then finally discharge out to the environment, back into a watercourse, or to groundwater, or whatever it may be. Back into it, and it's kind of full circle at that point. We also have the instance where majority of our treatment works have storm tanks. So this is if there's too much flow coming out of treatment works, if it's heavy rainfall or kind of a ongoing flow that just is persistent, the inlet works will become overloaded, and at that point we divert flow away to a storm tank. That's kind of a holder or a buffering tank. Essentially, it buys a certain amount of time. In an ideal world, that flow is then returned back into the inlet works and it goes through the process for treatment. Unfortunately, if there's times where flow continues to arrive that exceeds the capacity of the works, it will then discharge from the storm tank to the environment via a storm overflow. So I thought that was just kind of worth setting the scene a little bit. So I suppose the question from then on in is why do we have overflows and why are there performance issues at treatment works? I think fundamentally Thames Water knows its position in terms of its performance is not where it needs to be. We are investing a huge amount, unprecedented amount, into trying to reverse the trend of lack of investment in the past potentially, and our shareholders are forking up some of the funding for that. Some of the causes as to why our treatment works end up getting overwhelmed is predominantly down to infiltration. So there's just an example there. It's kind of small little cracks and defects in the pipework, often known as death by 1,000 cuts, because it's kind of small incremental points throughout quite a large sewer catchment. So it can be quite hard to trace. It's okay, it's fine as a solution to fix. It's just often quite hard to find exactly where it is. And often is the case, you fix one point and then it moves on to the next point. So it is tricky. We do have programs in place to tackle infiltration, but it is a tricky cause to fix. We also have misconnections. So we have people's properties that would be incorrectly plumbed, and we might have rainwater and roof drainage and driveways that connect into the foul sewer when they should be going into a surface water sewer or to a local watercourse. We need to kind of reverse that trend. That's down to a development thing and a development control. We need to ensure that surface water goes to where it needs to be and not into the foul sewer. We also have inundation. So we have kind of, when you have periods of prolonged rainfall and flooding, they may emanate itself over the top of manholes. Manholes aren't usually sealed as in watertight. They are there for a venting point to let things out if there's a problem. But unfortunately, the other way around works so that there are holes in it and water will get in, and usually in quite a quantity. We also have physical damage. So this can be water pipes and things that are pushed through into the sewers, can cause large amounts of, again, this is groundwater that's getting through with a pipe that has managed to be protruding through. We also have dual manholes, not so much of an issue in this area, but just generally another opportunity where unfortunately surface water and foul water happen to be connected via the same manhole, so that if one were to become overwhelmed, it can discharge into the other one. So less of a problem for this area, so I won't go into too much detail on that. We also have unauthorized connections, particularly in London, but we find, in some places people don't want to pay the rates and pay to discharge their waste. They may sometimes connect illegally. So a number of factors there, I suppose, at play. I think that's the important part. River health generally. So we know as a water industry, we are one of the biggest factors for the contributing factors for poor water quality, and we're doing a huge amount, as I said before, on investing to reverse that trend. We are investing billions, and it's really our aspiration to achieve good ecological status on all our watercourses. It's just the aspiration from our customers doesn't necessarily meet the realities of how long it takes to invest in the assets. So particularly since lockdown, there's a huge appetite to kind of get out and about and access watercourses. Unfortunately, it takes us a very long time and a prolonged amount of investment to kind of fix, again, these old heritage issues of poor water quality. Some of the plans we're putting in place. So we do have a river health action plan. Fundamentally, kind of the three priorities for us is to continue to discharge high quality treated effluent and meet our standards. So that's just meet what we've been asked to do by the EA. We want to eliminate discharges altogether. We do consider them unacceptable. But again, that is a new stance. It's going to take decades to kind of reverse that trend. And importantly, we want to work closer with our partners than ever before. So we recognise our partners have got the finger on the pulse in catchments far more than we do. And actually, by working with them, we can achieve more than we would on our own. Some of you may have seen at the start of this year, we had an interactive storm overflow map that we were the first water company to come out with this. So I hope you've seen it or seen it in the media. This is our first attempt at really being open and transparent with our data. So it is a live interactive map. We also have made the data available via an API format so that people can use the data as they see fit. And it really does document in a near real-time position the performance of our treatment works, whether or not they are spilling or whether or not they are not. It is a first iteration. We welcome feedback. It is going to evolve. We've had a huge amount of feedback so far, and it is kind of version 1 at the moment. Kind of being a bit more specific then, so for the region we're talking about, we do actually have, actually it's probably not a very good map, this one might be a slightly better one. We do have 6 treatment works in this particular catchment we're talking about. 4 of them discharge to watercourses, 2 of them do not. So we'll come on to that in a second. But actually, I've got a bit more about the performance here. So some of the storm overflow discharge data for 4 of the treatment works, because they discharge, they have storm permits and they discharge to rivers. As you can see, not where we want the performance to be. Very fluctuating in terms of their performance. That's hugely down to the weather. And we do have some plans in place to kind of improve the situation on these treatment works. So there are 5 schemes planned over the next couple of years to improve the performance of these works. And we kind of hope to see that a notable difference in the EDM, the spill data for them. It won't come down to 0. That we know that's needs longer term, far more investment than we've got to date. And it is a sort of a 20-30 year journey to be able to do that. Working in partnership. So as I said before, working in partnership is a real priority for Thames. So we're currently investing £9 million into 3 smarter water catchments. These are catchment partnerships in our boundaries. So we have the Chest, the Crane and the Evenlode, and we're working closely with them at the moment. And we're also looking to expand that in our next business plan, which starts in 2025. So we've got a £5 million support fund supporting the 25 other catchment partnerships we have at the moment, to basically get them in a ready position to become a smarter water catchment come 2025. So we're throwing money at catchment partnerships and hoping to build capacity within them. And we do hope to roll the 3 smarter water catchments up into 14 catchments come 2025, and we'll be able to announce which catchments they are March, April next year. So for this region, it would be the sort of, I guess, a combination of the Luton Lee, Upper and Middle Lee. And I noticed Sarah's on the call, so Sarah would be very much involved with that. Just a nod towards the future, really. So we're obviously doing a lot to kind of bring up performance as to where we are now. That's not where we need it to be. So that's just going to bring us back to kind of the status quo. What we need is far more investment than we've ever had before, and that's where we've been doing long-term 25-year plans for our wastewater. It's never been done before. The industry has all been driven now to do this. And really it's to justify, again, that step change in investment that's needed between how we've invested for the last 30 years compared to actually how we need to invest for the next 30. So for your region, there is a catchment strategic plan, which I welcome you to go and have a look at. And it does sort of break down levels of investment needed on a sewage catchment level by level. And it breaks it down into a level of flood risk, level of kind of population growth, level of climate change, the impact on climate change on each individual catchment in the Hertfordshire area. So I would very much welcome you to go and have a look at that. And then finally, hopefully I've managed 10 minutes. Finally, just some real headline, I suppose, from the DWMP, the Drainage and Wastewater Management Plan that we've produced. It's a huge ask that we're going to have to start asking customers to fund, that this huge step change in investment that's needed. We're asking for 32 billion over the next 25 years. I mean, we're really going to be pushing the boundary as to asking our customers to pay for the environment they would like. And I think that's now the step change that's needed. It's no longer a case of static bills. Unfortunately, it's actually we're going to need to ask for more money if people want a better environment. So this DWMP has just been produced. It's been published on our website, and it will be used as part of our next business plan submission in next year, PR24, ready for 2025 to Ofwat. And it's there as our evidence case, basically, to ask for a substantial amount of funding to improve performance at our wastewater assets. I've very quickly whizzed through that. I don't know how I've done with timing, but I welcome any questions.
Thanks very much, Tim. Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah,
That's
sure.
probably the best thing to do at this point.
Stop sharing. I'll stop sharing. There we go. Clearly don't use Zoom very often. There we go.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, thanks for taking us through that and for sticking to time. I mean, there may be some questions that are best asked once we've had all the presentations, but does anyone have any questions for Tim now? Actually, I had one. The objectives of the improvement programs, and apologies that you don't have this level of detail. My understanding that the improvement program at Weston was essentially not to deal with storm overflows, but essentially to make the normal operation of the plant more satisfactory. Is that correct?
Yeah, so for Weston, it is that example is, yeah, we intend to improve the quality of the effluent that we produce, not to fix storm overflows. So Weston, as it stands at the moment, wouldn't have been considered a priority spill site. So we've got nearly 360 treatment works catchments. We are prioritizing them for where we need to tackle first. So it will be on the list. It's just not imminent in terms of its need. We appreciate all of them need to get down to zero. It's just we have to tackle those that are the most frequent spillers first.
Yeah, I mean, my observation, having looked both at your data and there's some other data that actually covers all the other water authorities as well, I think, is that it's the small rural water treatment works which have the spillage problem, other than the large urban ones. Is that a fair comment?
I think it probably is, and I think it's probably the reflection of they have higher susceptibility to infiltration. So that's usually the problem. We're in rural catchments, high groundwater levels, particularly in our Cotswolds area. I appreciate we're not quite there, but there are areas which are more prone than others, and they generally tend to be rural, because urban catchments by default have bigger systems. They have bigger sewage catchments and sewage treatment work, so they have a bit more capacity to hold it, whereas rural, it's very kind of A to B, and there's no real storage in between. So yes, it's a fair observation.
Okay. Right then, I mean, one of the complications of North Hertfordshire is it sits right on the watershed between the Thames and the Ouse catchment, which means that unlike most of Hertfordshire, we have a chunk of the district in the Anglian water area and a chunk in the Thames water area. So next we have Joe Slack from Anglian Water, who is going to tell us about what they're doing. So Joe, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks Tim as well for taking us through some stuff that I'll no doubt unfortunately cross over a little bit, but I'll try and minimize that where possible. Could I get access to the screen share?
You should have access now.
Okay. Oh crikey! Enable external content. Does that come through?
Yeah, that's fine.
Brill. So yeah, I'm Joe Stack. So I'm head of water recycling logistics, which essentially water recycling is our return of wastewater back to the environment. So I deal with anything that's kind of within that network, and I tend to deal with the stuff that's moved on wheels, so tankers, tippers, various things like that. But obviously have a very, very keen interest in the network itself. So bit of background to us. I won't go into too much detail. So we serve 7 million customers across the east of England and Hartlepool, and obviously you can see down in the left hand sort of bottom corner is Hertfordshire and North Hertfordshire particularly. So our region tends to be one of the driest in the country, with 2/3 of the national average of rainfall, and we're also one of the fastest growing regions, with 175,000 additional homes by 2025. So our network is 76,000 kilometres of sewers, which is like to come up with these stats, almost twice the world's sort of circumference, and that kind of, in terms of our water recycling centres, that correlates to sort of just over 1100. Our strategic goals are, we try and focus these around our purpose, which I think is really strong. So our purpose is to bring environmental and social prosperity to the region that we serve through our commitment to loving every drop. There's a couple of the key goals that are important in this space around creating a sustainable future for our region, and then in the strategic ambitions piece on the right is working with others to achieve significant improvement in ecological quality across our catchments, and making ourselves resilient to the risk of drought and flooding, from a water and waste point of view. Similar to Thames, we've got a strategic campaign. So we've linked up with Severn Trent Water, and I used to work there as well, so I can speak to this really keenly. We believe our customers should have access to rivers that are beautiful places and rich in nature. So we've launched our Get River Positive campaign, which will link to some of like the data share stuff that Tim alluded to in his presentation. So we'll strive to do no harm to UK rivers and ensure they can thrive. So the 5 commitments in there are around ensuring storm overflows and sewage treatment works don't harm rivers, create more opportunities for everyone to enjoy our region's rivers, to support others and care for rivers, enhance our rivers and create new habitats so wildlife can thrive, and be open and transparent about our performance and plans. We welcome the current scrutiny on water recycling and pollutions, and over the next 5 years we'll be investing 811 million as part of our WINEP, we call it, but it's our Water Industry Natural Environment Programme. And this, again, we talk about setting the scene in the big picture. So sewer overflows particularly contribute 4% of the reasons why UK rivers aren't in high quality, and in the east of England that's only 1%. There are other drivers that we recognise that we need to sort of be collaborating on, and that's agriculture and rural management, urban development and transport, non-native species that can invade our network, and the misconnected plumbing. So our plan and investment around storm spills specifically. So in AMP7, which is the investment cycle we're currently in, we're in year 4 of that 5-year period. So we've accelerated £200 million of spend into that AMP. We are installing more storm tanks, so that buffering capacity on treatment works to the tune of 80 million. And we're increasing our capacity to reduce the risk of spills at water recycling centres to the tune of 56 million. The other piece that's really growing is the investing in our monitoring. So recognising we're operating across an extremely large sort of network of pipes and assets, the more monitoring we can do to get proactive about their performance and getting the right interventions at the right time. So that's what we're calling like our sewer visualization system is a big investment as well. We're improving bathing water quality and installing sort of sustainable drainage solutions, which we call SUDs, which are kind of a lot of the time be nature based, which is really exciting, and some new thinking that's going on in the industry. So we want to see the future where there's a statutory need to tackle the storm overflows and ensuring prioritisation that through the price review process that we've touched on, that they're prioritised. We want a national plan for our rivers jointly owned, a ban on wet wipes and undesirables that are flushed into the system, and collaborative action to restore rivers and natural habitats. So briefly on the water resources piece, because we'd included this because of sort of the breadth of the topic. So each company will set out a water resources management plan, which ensures we have sufficient needs to meet current and future demands over the 25-year period. So they're published 5-yearly, and our latest plan is currently available for consultation. The storm overflows. So yeah, apologies if we're sort of overlapping a bit here, but the permits are issued by the Environment Agency. That, like we've touched on earlier, they take on both sewage and rainwater, and the intention for the storm overflow is to take pressure off the system by releasing the excess sort of storm water into rivers and sea to protect homes and businesses from flooding. So the vast majority of what they release would be rainwater. The sewage network is a historic asset and was built in Victorian times and upgraded in the 60s and 70s, and we've not, no new ones have been built since 1989. We've got, in terms of our monitoring program, by the end of 2023 we'll have our which is complete now, the event duration monitoring program. So we've got all our monitors in place, and we'll be sharing that data, as I'll touch on in a sec, but a real opportunity to target investment in storm overflows. So again, picking out a couple of salient points off this slide rather than everything, because a bit of overlap, but the investment in our event duration monitoring enables us to identify the storm overflows that are spilling too frequently and make our targeted investment. 94% of the bathing waters in the region have achieved good or excellent status, and that's as a result of previous investment. And a key one I get really involved in and excited about is we work with partners like ECAS, so where fats, oils and greases, or FOGs as we call them, are discharged into the sewer and cause a restriction in what the sewers and network can cope with. We work with a partner called ECAS that will then go and educate sort of businesses around the difficulties that disposing fats, oils and greases down the sewers cause, and then can help actually put in some asset related stuff in terms of like interceptors, things like that can actually stop it getting into the sewers. And we've kind of touched on what factors affect how sewers operate. So our specific ambitions around the Get River Positive is to eliminate all serious pollutions by 2025, and that these are categories that are set by the Environment Agency. We want and reduce less serious pollutions by 45%, which are very minimal impact. We, similar to Thames, we consider any pollution to be unacceptable, and our absolute ambition is to reduce it. And our storm overflows target is to reduce spills to an average of 20 by 2025. Touched a bit on the investment already, but again, a couple of key ones is the 22,000 additional sewer monitors, which will give us live visibility of the performance of our network and assets, and make us give us the ability to make targeted interventions where assets are not performing in the way we'd expect them to. And the other piece at the bottom there that we haven't touched on is the full flow to full treatment schemes that are being implemented, where a works needs to demonstrate it can cope with flow at all times round the year. From a storm overflow perspective, we've been focusing for some time on reducing the impact of storm overflows, which is linked to our closure of storm overflows. So in terms of how many we've got, so we've got environmental permits for just over 1,500 storm overflows in our region, but since privatisation we've surrendered 220 permits for for storm overflows and remove those where we can. Again, we're working, in partnership with local authorities, the River Trust, farmers, landowners, highways, to make sure we are, collaborating in the right way to get the right result. In terms of our area across the region, this is 2022 data. 5 discharges from storm overflows were recorded as minor pollutions. 3 of these were related to storm discharges and 2 attributed to blockages in the network. Typically around 3 to 4% of an average year, pollutions are linked to storm overflows. So it's not an absolute silver bullet, but recognise it's an important target to go after. And some of the other causes, without going over the ones we've discussed already, I don't think we've touched on mechanical breakdown as a potential reason for pollution. But the bottom point again around the monitoring, we're building some algorithms to help us understand, the 22,000 monitors that are going into the network, help us to come up with some predictive analysis to get some targeted improvements in place. How we're going to communicate about sewage, so data transparency. So Thames have been great and got the live map out there first. We're going to be following suit. So as part of Get River Positive, we've got a map showing storm overflow data and investment schemes, which again, encourage people to have a look at, or we'll happily share also. And we send our event duration monitoring data to the Rivers Trust, which is published. So March 2025 is the deadline for the industry to publish the real-time storm overflow data, but we're absolutely aspiring to have this information available sooner than that, and I'm involved in the project at the moment to expedite that and get that available as soon as possible. We also deal with environmental requests, where anyone can get in touch with the company, and we've got some really specific timelines around how we respond to those. So we've had sort of 13 in 2020. There was 13 contacts, 2021 65, and 22 65 again. So you can see the interest is picking up, and rightly so. And just to give a bit of a flavour for how many queries we've received. So there's also the education team. So I've not discussed that. So the education team deliver sort of lessons in schools where we'll educate children on pollutions and unflushables, and we've managed to engage with over 31,000 students across the region, and that was in 2021. And we'll happily sort of engage local stakeholders with sewage treatment, and we'll happily go on site tours of our water recycling centres. So if that was something people were interested in, we'd absolutely love the opportunity to do that. So just again, coming towards the end, I've popped in the map, the green map of North Hertfordshire, and where our treatment centres and storm overflows are in the region. But that is there's an interactive map where storm overflows are published. So that's just an extract from that, and it will show our assets, our investment schemes, and where we have actually decommissioned sort of storm overflows. And there's currently in your area, which is a bit more high level really, but it's an interactive map where there's details about any issues, any maintenance plans and investments, but it's a bit higher level. We really want to get into the live view, so people can see that live. But it's not unhelpful in terms of showing where the maintenance plans and investments are going in, and that's called In Your Area. So yeah, thanks for listening. Hopefully I haven't crossed over too much, but there's some similar material in there.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe.
No problem.
I mean, just on the things you've said people can see online, Can you make sure that Georgina or Eleanor has the details of where people can find those, and then we can let people
Yeah.
know? I mean, they can probably search for them, but it's easier if they know where they are. Are there
Yeah,
any
absolutely.
questions for Joe? Louise?
Yes, it's very interesting to hear all the work that's going on regarding stopping spillages and pollution. I just wondered if there was any information you could give us about work to stop quite as much abstraction of water from our rivers, particularly the chalk streams.
Yeah, I think abstraction's a really good question. So we're doing as much as we can to reduce the impact from an abstraction point of view. If I just get the
Actually, would it be sensible to let Claire do her presentation, since abstraction is mainly an affinity responsibility in this area, and then you might both want to say something about it. But Claire may be going to cover some of the abstraction issues, I guess.
I will do, definitely, yeah.
Is that okay, Louise? If we come back to that once Affinity have done their bit?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I've just got the numbers up, so yeah, I'm ready when we've finished with Claire.
Okay. I mean, this is, I guess, the problem with having three presentations like this. There's a certain amount of overlap between them.
Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, it's Doug Kennedy here. I'm not in Hertfordshire. I'm in Buckinghamshire. I chaired the Chalk Rivers Action Group and continue work with Children's Society and with River Thames Conservation Trust and other bodies. In particularly Anglian presentation this now, there's a lot of mention of storm tanks and overflows and things. But of course, it'd be much better if we didn't need to add to the storm overflows, but reduced the amount of throughput to the sewage works, even when it's raining. So you did mention CSOs, but I mean, what is Anglian's thoughts on the amount of preventative measures such as CSOs dealing with those? And the other thing, let's deal with that one. Yeah, thanks. Could you? Yeah, but so yeah, the preventative using SUDS and CSOs rather than building more storm tanks.
Yeah, so I think using SUDS, speaking personally, and I know it's the company ambition as well, and something we're putting into our strategy for the next investment cycle, which will start in a couple of years. So we've submitted our plans to Ofwat for approval. SUDS and nature-based solutions are absolutely sort of our preference. So they give us good opportunity to increase our or decrease the flows coming into our works, while sort of working with solutions that are sort of carbon friendly, and they genuinely give us some really good opportunities to sort of reduce that impact by working with nature, rather than sort of concrete and carbon heavy sort of asset-based investment. So I think they are really important in terms of our sort of investment plan, and where we can implement them, they are preferred.
I mean, they are typically associated with new developments. There's not much retrofitting of SUDS, is there?
No, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Should we move on then to Claire Carlaw from Affinity Water? Claire.
Yeah, hi. Could I be able to share as well, please?
Yeah, we should be able to share now.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all see that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that fine, or do you want it? Can you see it as a full screen, or can you?
No, I think I think you've not done
there. Is that better?
That's better. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for inviting me. So my name is Claire Carlaw. I'm the head of engagement at Affinity Water, specifically covering the WRMP, which is the Water Resources Management Plan, but also the price review, which I think Tim and Joe have both mentioned some of this terminology as well. So yeah, my job is around engagement, really. So what I wanted to really talk to you about was the Water Resources Management Plan, because that is what Affinity does in terms of planning for water in the future. So just a little bit of a reminder about the area that Affinity covers. We have what we call the central area, which is where yourselves are, and that's that kind of sort of almost sort of C shape that goes around the sort of around the edge of London, Stalk down to Way. And then we've got two other areas, so Dower, which is right on the coast, Folkestone Way. And then we've got Brett area, which is smack bang in Anglian Waters kind of area, on that east coast, so Clacton, that sort of area. So we've got kind of three sort of disparate areas really that we cover, and what we do is supply water. So you know, Tim and Joe have talked about the sort of waste elements, but our primary role is water supply. So we don't have any waste water treatment in our operation. And just a bit really around planning for water and looking forward in terms of planning for water. There are a huge amount of challenges, and I won't go through everything on these slides, but just to say that we do actually have around 10% of the UK's chalk streams in our area, and we have traditionally abstracted from chalk aquifers as a company. We don't have large surface reservoirs, so you'll be familiar probably if you've ever been to Heathrow around the big open reservoirs at Thames House, and you know, Gratham that Anglian has. So there's big open raw storage reservoirs. Affinity doesn't have any of those. We do borrow some, so we actually use some of the reservoirs of Thames and Anglian has got, and we do share some of those resources. But Affinity traditionally has always abstracted from its chalk aquifers, and that's just important in the context of what I'll go on to cover. And there's a few figures on here to show the sort of deficit really that we potentially are looking at as we move forward into 2050, which is the planning horizon that we look out to for water resources. And that is a mixture of population growth, the requirement to reduce abstraction reduction from these precious sort of chalk aquifers, and also climate change is in there too. So lots of drivers, basically giving us a really big gap in terms of the amount of water that we have going forward. So what have we done? But I think certainly Joe's referenced the WRMP. Every 5 years we produce a water resources management plan, and it looks forward right over the long term. And we published ours in November last year for consultation, and it closed in February. And we're just working through the final bits. We will be publishing the revised draft plan on the 31st of August. So we're nearly there, she says. But what's been really interesting this time, and I think again is quite relevant, is the we haven't done this in just as Affinity. In a real step change for the industry, we've actually really worked collaboratively across companies. Specifically for Affinity, we've worked in an alliance called WRSE, so the Water Resources South East, and that's a group of companies: Thames, ourselves, Portsmouth, SES, Southwest, and Southern. But we've also, because we've got Brett, that one area, if you remember, up on the East Coast, we've also worked really closely with another regional group called Water Resources East, and that includes Anglian. So we've been working really collaboratively across all the companies to look not just at solutions in our own our own small supply area, but much more widely across all the areas, and even out of region, looking for between these regional groups, are there options to share water, move water, and utilize the water that we've got across the whole area. And that's been a real change a sort of in the approach that we've had as an industry, and a very positive one. So in the consultation, and again, I won't go through all these numbers because we'll have the slides for you, but we got a really good level of response to the consultation, over 223 individual responses, good mix, lots of customer responses, which is really positive for a WRMP. It isn't always the most sort of sexiest, exciting consultation for some people, but we did get quite a good level of customer response. And then all the community groups, local authorities, etc., that you might well expect, but a good level of engagement and a good level of interest in a lot of the detailed materials that we produce. So we were really positive actually about the level of response that we got. Overall, our WRMP was really well received, and again a few figures there, but we got 55% that sort of felt that it did represent the best value plan. So that's that mix of, costs versus benefit really, and especially the environmental benefit. There were a few challenges in there, some about us going a bit quicker and faster and doing more on abstraction reduction. So we have reflected that. We got some really quite positive responses on some of the big strategic schemes, and I'll cover one of those particular ones, which is particularly relevant. But overall, a really, fairly positive response, to be honest, on our WRMP. But what have we changed? And again, I won't go into all the detail of this, but we have accelerated our abstraction reduction programme a bit more. So we have responded to that go a bit quicker. We have worked really closely actually with the Environment Agency, specifically on one scheme where the environmental benefit and the need for that actually has been delayed a little bit, and actually that saves a huge amount of money. It was a scheme that was coming in very just at the end of the period, and actually if we waited a couple more years we got a better solution for it. So just really sort of sensible planning, to be honest. We've also increased our demand management ambition, so that's increasing our target to reduce per capita consumption, which is the amount of water customers and businesses use, and also looking at how we really step up our behavioural change campaigns again in that area, as well as maintaining our programme and our plans for smart metering. So we're planning to roll out smart metering across the whole area over three sort of investment periods. Okay, so our plan at the highest level, you can kind of split it out into three bits. So the orange lozenges, if I can use that term, are all about this demand management that I've referenced. So that's our smart metering programme, our leakage reduction, and our demand management programme, and that's kind of continuing really on the journey Affinity's already been on over this last investment kind of period. The second bit, which are the green ones, is really about us building more connection across the area. So if you remember and flip back to that diagram I showed you of the kind of area that Affinity supplies, what's been really important and what's very essential really to delivering the plans is actually connecting between those different zones, those different areas. And there's a huge programme in there to sort of almost connect the dots, really make sure the water moves across the area as effectively and efficiently as it can. But that still doesn't meet that deficit. So by doing all that, we still don't meet the deficit. So what we have got in the plan are some quite significant new schemes kind of coming forward. And the biggest one is the Grand Union Canal scheme, which I'll got a little bit more detail on. It's quite an interesting one. But we did have a question on abstraction reductions. So I've got some figures there. We've got 3 potential planning scenarios around abstraction reductions, a low environmental destination, and that's the figures you've got here. There's a middle and a higher environmental destination, which are all in our water resources management plan. So all the detail is there, and I'm really happy to send the links, etc. So you can have those. But overall, we are going for a really ambitious reduction in abstractions moving forward. So you'll see that before, most of them are front end loaded as well. So about 70% occurring before 2035. So yeah, very much kind of really changing effectively the way the Affinity Water customers will be supplied going forward. Okay. So the Grand Union Canal scheme. So in doing those, in reducing the abstraction from the chalk aquifers, obviously we need to get the water from somewhere. And it's great, we will reduce people usage of water through the various behavioural change and the leakage reductions and metering, etc. But we still need to bring more water into the area. And the first scheme that we have in the plan is the Grand Union Canal scheme. So this is a joint scheme. It's a joint scheme between Severn Trent, Affinity and the Canal and Rivers Trust. And the idea will be to take water from Severn Trent's Minworth site, which, if any of you know the Midlands very well, is kind of in Sutton Coldfield, just on the edge of Birmingham. So it's taking water from that site, treating it, and then getting it to the canal, and then it will come down the canal. It goes from the Coventry Canal, Oxford, and then into the Grand Union. It requires a small number of pump upgrades and lock upgrades, but actually in terms of a big scheme like this, quite minimal amount of sort of assets added. And then we'll abstract it at a location near Leighton Buzzard. So we do need to build a new water treatment works at Leighton Buzzard. And then that will be brought into the Affinity area, actually kind of right into that central area. So right into kind of your region. It's a really effective scheme, to be honest. And it's the first large scheme that comes from the whole of the Water Resources South East region. It offers multiple benefits, both obviously in terms of water supply, but also all the additional benefits that we can include, such as to the local environment, to the local community in terms of access. There's a huge amount of kind of positivity around the scheme, and actually just utilising an asset that already exists for a new use, really. So yeah, seen very, very positively, and the plan is that will come in 2031-32. So it's full steam ahead on that one in terms of getting it through the planning kind of arena. It will go through as a DCO for planning. That's the plan at the moment. So in terms of timeline, yes, we're just about to produce the statement of response and the revised draft plan. So 31st of August, she says. I'm crossing my fingers because I think I've nearly finished writing it. So I think we're there, and it's just on its final review. There'll be a final okay from DEFRA, hopefully sort of August, autumn. And then, as the other guys have said, the business plan is submitted on the 3rd of October. So that will take the first kind of 5 or so years of the Water Resources Plan. And effectively, that's the element that sets the bill impact for the customer as well. Okay, I think, yeah, that was it for me.
Okay, thanks very much, Claire. So, Louise, you asked a question about abstraction, which the part of the district Louise comes from, I know, is an Anglian rather than a Thames area. So, Claire, you've covered some of it, but Joe, you had something you were going to say about abstraction as well in response to those.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. It's probably not as aesthetically pleasing, and it's just me talking than Claire's, unfortunately. So we're looking at making the sort of biggest reductions in the country on abstraction. So we are on track to leave an extra 85 million litres of water per day in the environment by 2025. So that's, challenging in regard to the fact that we're operating in the driest region with the fastest sort of growing population. So specifically on chalk streams, we're working to ensure they have good ecological quality, and so those two tie up, and at the same time we are working at pace with our strategic pipeline. So unfortunately a bit more invasive than the really good scheme that Claire was talking about around utilising the canals. Probably because the region is so dry, we are putting in a sort of strategic pipeline that's moving water from north to south broadly, and that's due for completion in 2025. So that will enable us to reduce abstraction by 31,000 megalitres per year, and that's a massive project to put that pipeline in. Notwithstanding, it is a bit invasive in terms of digging and assets, but it's genuinely really exciting. One of the biggest sort of infrastructure projects that's going on in Europe at the minute.
Okay, Louise, have Claire and Joe answered your question between them?
Yes, I think so. It was a little bit disappointing to see there's no change in the abstraction from the Hiss and the Ivel until 2030, but I guess that's tying in with the implementation of this Grand Union Canal project to cross over. But no, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Roger, you have your hand up. Roger, we can't hear you.
My question is about capture and storage. I've been very disappointed in the three.
I don't know. I can barely hear you. Can you speak up a bit or get a bit closer to the microphone?
Is that better?
That's a bit better.
A bit better. Okay. I'm a bit disappointed that we haven't heard the words increasing capture and storage. And this is my question. I receive about 22 inches of rain each year on my garden. This is about 5,500 cubic meters, which is about 6 times as much water as I import through my water meter from Affinity Water. So in fact, I'm a sort of net exporter of water with an average garden. I conclude that there is plenty of water in the east of England, but a shortage of capture and storage. At an open meeting at Affinity Water's HQ in Hatfield a few years ago, I was told there was no plans to increase capture and storage in Affinity Water's area before 2080. Given the increased awareness of climate change, what are the latest plans? When will there be a plan for the area to be self-sufficient in water, and when is it likely to be achieved? The answer presumably will be a large reservoir, or perhaps a long pipe from mid-Wales. Mid-Wales gets 10 times as much rain as we do, and very conveniently it's 10 times as high in altitude for the water to run downhill to us. So in summary, my question is, what is Affinity Water doing to increase capture and storage?
Claire, that sounds like one for you.
It does, yeah. No, definitely. So thank you. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of sort of big schemes and big reservoirs, etc., I've already explained a little bit about the Grand Union Canal scheme, which is the first scheme. And that, I suppose, interestingly, you might almost say it does come from Wales, because Birmingham customers drink Welsh water. and then it will go through to Minworth sewage treatment works, and then we'll treat it and then take it down. So I suppose, yeah, it is kind of coming that direction, I suppose, if you think of it in at its widest sense. But in terms of reservoirs, so one of the other schemes that was on that very high level plan that I showed you was one that we call CESRO, which is the South East Strategic Resource Option. Some of you may know it as Abingdon Reservoir, and it's originally a Thames Water scheme, but it's actually a joint scheme now. It's joint between Thames, Affinity and Southern Water, and at the moment that is coming in the plan around the 2040 2042 timeline, and that will be a shared asset that we will all utilise across us all. So that's the one reservoir scheme. We actually share Gratham Reservoir with Anglian, and we're actually going to probably take less of that, so Cambridge can have a bit more. That work is progressing. So we are looking at these sort of bigger schemes, looking where they could be, where and how we share that kind of wider resource going forward. In terms of more local, catchment and we do encourage, kind of a whole array of water saving locally, and part of that is our demand management program. So helping customers, use water butts and that sort of thing. So we're looking at that behavioural change campaign really carefully. But we still need those big strategic schemes coming in if we're to reduce the abstraction that we've just talked about on chalk streams.
Okay, thanks so much. I think talking about chalk streams moves us neatly on to our next presentation from Sarah.
Steve, can I just a member of the public that was submitted by email?
Okay.
Yes, this member of the public couldn't attend, but they asked if we would put this question to Affinity. So they say that Affinity ran a valuable SOLO tariff encouraging lower clean water consumption, and that relative to standard rates, SOLO was cheaper per cubic metre unless you went over a certain figure based on household size. They say that it was really great for water conservation and that it encouraged switching houses to water meters, but that it's been discontinued. They want to ask Affinity if you're going to revisit SOLO and give a nominal credit off surface water rates for water butts.
So I will send you more details, but we are just about to start a tariff trial where there's a specific area, and I can't remember the details of the area, so I will get this for you, Georgina, but we are starting a tariff trial, which is absolutely looking at, do we alter the way that we charge for water? It is a trial. We want to see how it works, but it's exactly looking at that. So I think it's very low charge or almost no charge right at the bottom end, and then it really stacks up the more water you use. But I can definitely provide the details of that.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to the resident. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks very much. Okay, Sarah, can we move on to you now and talk about what you're doing, the work you're doing on chalk streams?
Eve, sharing, please.
Yep, you should be good to go now.
Okay, can everyone see that? Why can I not? Okay, is that visible for everybody?
Yes, although you probably want to switch to presentation mode. That's it.
Okay, fab. All right, great. Well, thank you for the invitation tonight. I am Sarah Perry. I'm the catchment coordinator at the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust. So I've been asked to give a brief update on some of our work within the sort of North Herts district chalk streams. It's worth just a quick introduction to the Wildlife Trust. So we cover the whole of Hertfordshire County and also 4 boroughs in Middlesex, and we are one of 47 trusts nationally that cover county by county. And we have been focusing on chalk river conservation for over a decade now. So since the Water Framework Directive piece of legislation came in. The Trust has worn two hats, one to help deliver nature's recovery on chalk streams, and the other to support hosting the catchment partnerships, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So I think it's just, worth reminding ourselves why all this talk of water, why is water such an important topic, especially at this time? And it's really, because of the fact that chalk streams are globally rare habitats, which I'm sure many of you in this room will have heard before, less than 250 in the world. But here in Hertfordshire, we are stewards to around 10% of that global total, so around 25 individual water bodies that make up our chalk stream network. And, putting into a local context why these areas are important, the Trust put together a piece of work a couple of years back now, which looked at the state of nature and crucially the changes we'd seen in wildlife throughout our county over the last 50 years. We also tried to assess broadly what % of habitat land cover there was remaining, and came up with some figures. And I think it's quite stark to sort of put into context where wetlands sit. So wetlands being our rivers, our brooks, our flowing water, as well as our standing water habitats like lakes, ponds, wet grassland, wet woodland, etc. And Hertfordshire only has 1% of its landmass covered in wetland, which is staggeringly low. And you put that into context of the national average, which is arguably low as well, of 5%. We're in quite dire straits with our lack of wetland habitat here in Hertfordshire. So what we do have, we need to make sure we're all making concerted efforts to restore and protect, but also we need to be thinking about that whole catchment, creating more ability for the landscape to hold water, holding water back, creating pockets of wetland where we perhaps drain them for things like agriculture, house building, and other uses in the past. And, we know these stats probably quite well, but we know that our rivers are nowhere near where they need to be. This legislation that was introduced in 2009 was meant to set us on a trajectory of improving our rivers. And in fact, we've kind of gone backwards. So at the moment, less than 15% of our rivers nationally meet what we call good ecological status. None of our rivers meet good chemical status. And obviously we've heard a lot about work here tonight to try to rectify that long-standing problem. It's going to take time, but investment is being at least channeled in the right direction for that to be a possibility going forward. I would like to flag here, though, that it isn't just the water industry, it isn't just agriculture. Urban and transport play a huge part in this water quality conversation as well. And I would urge, and we have been speaking with HCCSP, but to really pick up on the ability of the road networks and the kind of hard surface towns of our county to really help with mitigating water quality issues going forward, something which I'd really like to see reflected in the HCCSP strategy going forward. So yeah, lots of issues, water quality, water quantity. I'm not going to dwell on them too much because we've heard a lot tonight from the water companies in terms of what they're doing to tackle those issues. And we know that, Hertfordshire is making good strides in putting together a strategy for water. There are a number of farm clusters as well that have been set up across Hertfordshire. So notably the River Bean catchment now has a farming cluster that's being facilitated by Farming Wildlife Advisory Group, and the Trust are feeding into that to really look at catchment scale management of how are our soils managed to help both store water and also help prevent some of the pollution issues we're seeing in surface water runoff and groundwater contamination as well. And in terms of our remit, the Trust and where we sit within all this, we are helping to facilitate citizen science schemes to look at the issues and data surrounding water quantity and water quality. Again, we are one of 8 national pilots on the River Bean this time, looking at how can we better get collaborative monitoring of our catchments, both across the water industry, the regulators, and third-party, voluntary monitoring, working together so we can really understand where these issues are occurring and then help to better target our interventions to improve this trinity of chalk stream health. So there is work going on in that sphere as well, but really we do hang our hats quite heavily on natural habitat as one of the 3 pillars of chalk stream health. You know, to some extent, we can have all the clean water we want flowing down our rivers, but if it's going through habitat that has been sequentially degraded over the years through things like dredging, through realignment, through a lack of floodplain connectivity, we're only going to see a sort of capped benefit in terms of what biodiversity can be restored to our rivers. We need to be tackling all three. And, you know, we are in a good position to be leading on that natural habitat piece. And so that's kind of what I want to move on to for the rest of the talk. So this just gives you an overview of the different catchments in Hertfordshire, and obviously you'll be familiar with the North Herts catchments. So the Ivor catchment flowing north into Bedfordshire and the River Ouse, and then obviously the upper reaches of the Mimram, Bean and Rib, which all feed into North Herts, down into the Lower Lee. So the Trust hosts a partnership. We've sort of been gifted this by the Environment Agency that consists of all of the Upper Lee south of Luton down to the M25 and each of those tributaries feeding in. So there's a heck of a lot of land there to cover. You know, we're working with over 45 different landowners across that network and over 350 individuals to try to bring people together to make positive steps towards managing our rivers better into the future. But that is, you know, that is a big undertaking, and it's not going to just happen overnight. In the sort of Ivor catchment, we have been sitting on the Upper Ouse and Bedford catchment partnership for the last couple of years. They've sort of devolved part of their work on chalk streams into a subgroup, which Revival and others sit on as well. So we've been working to try to progress some actions around the Ivor catchment, and Claire hasn't mentioned it, but I know Affinity are working with Revival to look at some augmentation schemes for benefiting flow in the Ivor catchment in the interim until these bigger resource options come online. So my role within this, alongside sort of the citizen science work and the catchment partnership hosting and building those relationships between the different stakeholders, is really delivering on some of our capital schemes with different partners and landowners. So looking at river restoration and greater capacity of the floodplain to create wetland features for our wildlife into the future. So we've got quite a few schemes. You know, over the last 5 years, we've delivered schemes on around 65 kilometres of waterway, so quite a significant chunk of our 400 kilometres in Herts. And one of the ones more local to you will be the partnership that we've been leading in North Hertfordshire for the last number of years. So initially, we started working with Ickleford Parish Council and a couple of the landowners in and around the village, so the Common Holders Association and the Lavender Farm, to try to draw together some practical restoration options for how we can restore a river that has been both dredged and realigned and had houses built right up to its edge. So we set out on that journey a couple of years back, and we came together and sort of developed our first stab at a plan, which the River His Conservation Group and ourselves have been working on delivering aspects of over the last few years. And that work to date has really been about awareness raising in the village in terms of, you know, this chalk stream that's a major asset, and also building up skills in that community to help manage our river better going forwards. And from that, it's developed into a larger project. So we put a bid in on behalf of this partnership. You can see the logos here last year to the Environment Agency to get some funding to really work those designs up, work those plans up for a bigger river restoration scheme that encompasses the River His, the River Orton and the River Purwell, sort of through and downstream of Hitchin. And this gives you a sort of overview map of the reaches that we're looking at. So we're looking at pretty much the whole of the Orton through Orton Head Common, where it rises near the Chalky, and down to Bedford Road. We're looking at the River Purwell from Purwell Nine Springs Nature Reserve right the way through Purwell Meadows, through Walsworth Common, downstream of sort of Hitchin, where it joins the Orton, and then going on from there, the River His through Ickleford, which is about 3 kilometres in and of itself. So all in all, there'll be around 6 kilometres of river that at the end of this year, we hope to have a restoration plan based on as much evidence as we can gain through existing data as to what the issues are, what some of the ecological figures are showing us needs to be focused on, and looking at some of the historical modifications that have been made to those river systems and looking at how we can sort of reverse those degradations and increase the range of habitat we have through this area. So we've been using a kind of combination at the moment of techniques. So we've been out taking drone flyovers of, oh, sorry, that video didn't work very well, of all the reaches of the river. And this gives us a really good baseline to not only see the real sort of lateral connectivity of the river to its floodplain and the uses around it, as well as what's going on linearly in its plan form, but also gives us a good benchmark for the future to look back when restoration work has been delivered and really understand what changes we might be seeing in those catchments. Another thing that this has flagged up, which has been quite interesting, is obviously a discussion around tree cover. So there's quite a well-known, thing that a closed canopy chalk river isn't going to support very many or good quality macrophytes, so the river plants. And these rivers are incredibly interlinked with their biology. They need that sort of seasonal variation of plants growing and retracting as the water levels change over the winter and the summer months. And where you have these closed canopy, we see, a devoid of any macrophytes being able to interact with those flows. So flying this drone over gives us a good sort of, high level, but wide ranging understanding of tree canopy cover across our rivers and where we might need to target some daylighting to help promote macrophytes in channel. So where are we going? So we commissioned a company called Flow, who are a specialist restoration company that have been working with the partners, ourselves, North Herts Council, CMS, the other landowners in the area, to go out and do some of these field investigations, as well as look at all the desk-based data that we have to support planning. We've now got an options report produced for each of those 3 rivers. It's just going through QA at the moment, and then the stakeholder group made up of the partners will be able to review those high-level options. So looking at what types of interventions would be most appropriate, where, considering things like constraints of services or surrounding land use, as well as what would be best for the river and also the communities that access these rivers along it. Following that consultation, which will happen in the next month or so, the sort of preferred options will go through an outline and detailed design phase. So basically really working through the detail of, okay, we're going to take these design principles and we need to make sure that they're the correct size and the correct width, etc. And they're going to work with that river system. So we should have confirmation of those by October, and then we'll look to submit those for EA permission through their permitting system. We've got funding currently to take it to that point. If we need to go through any flood risk modelling, which may be requested, it sort of depends on location of the features and in proximity to areas that currently have any flood risk, whether we need to do that or not. If we do, we will need to seek some further funding to deliver that aspect of work, and then obviously the construction thereafter. But the partnership it's been really interesting getting all the different people together, all the different landowners, and hearing their views and also their kind of insight into how that catchment has changed over time. So the aim is, let's make the habitat more resilient. It's something we can be cracking on with now. We don't have to wait to 2035 for when the water resource options are coming online. This is something we can get right in the interim, so that when we do hopefully get that water of good quality back in these systems, the biodiversity can really skyrocket and take hold. So that's everything from me.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. That's really interesting. I mean, clearly what you're looking at is much shorter term. Well, I suppose it depends whether or not you get the funding. It's much shorter term than some of the interventions from the water industry, which will be perhaps 10 or 15 years. But in addition, I mean, the Orton and the Purwell and the Hiz are less impacted by abstraction than some other chalk streams, aren't they?
Because they have an augmented flow at the moment, yes, they are. Yeah, and arguably, there are really good sections of reference habitat through there, but there are some really degraded sections due to dredging in the past, which
Yeah.
aren't going to get better just with more water going through them.
But absence of water is less of a problem in those rivers than it is, well, particularly in the Ivor, but probably some of the others as well. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Sarah? Okay, well, I have one. I mean, is the work you're doing going to identify the amount of funding that will be required?
We will have a construction plan that can be put out to tender. So we'll get some early contractor involvement at that stage to get an idea of what the base costs are going to be. Okay. I mean, you know, I've got a number of schemes that I've been working on in the same way, and you've got to go through these stages to get to that point before you can then pitch it for wider funding. And, you know, we've been successful. We've had about nearly £1 million worth of investment in the last 5 years that we've managed to channel into restoration works of different scales and across the Upper Lee catchment. So, you know, it is out there and it's possible to find it. It's just having that plan that everybody agrees on to begin with is the good starting step. Okay, fine. Okay, are there any other questions at all at this point? Doesn't look like there are. So thanks very much to our presenters. I think we've learned a lot about what's planned and what's happening. I mean, I think one of the things that I guess I've learned from not just this evening, but some further discussions with the people in the water industry is that it operates on quite a long time scale. I mean, I'm interested to hear about the discussion about the Abingdon Reservoir, because people I know who live near Abingdon tell me that it was being discussed 40 years ago, probably even 50 years ago. And I think there's an appreciation that there are some of these things that do take a very long time. But I think there also, I hope there's a recognition that there needs to be a change in the way in which things are done to address some of these issues. Mark, you've got your hand up now.
Steve, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to the council for putting on this evening's talk. I think it's a valuable opportunity to get parties together to hear the plans for the North Herts district. I hope councillors have found it useful. I think there are, however, some additional things that probably need to be said in the context of the debate in Hertfordshire. And perhaps this is an opportunity to bring those up. It was good to thank you to all the speakers, Tim, Joe, and Claire, for coming along. It must be a difficult gig at the moment with the profile of the water industry in the country at the moment and the absolutely appalling things that we have been discovering over the last few years. Sewage spills, to start there, as we did with Thames. Forgive me, I can't break down figures specifically to North Herts Council, because you may have worked out that the pie is cut in so many different ways. So I'll just speak about Hertfordshire. In 2022, in Hertfordshire as a whole, there were nearly 4,000 hours of sewage spilled. 90% were in the Lee catchment and 10% in the Colne catchment. By geographic area, they're about 50-50, 90%, 10%. 50% was in Sir Oliver Heald's constituency, which includes a part of North Hertfordshire. And so I have a question to Thames to explain that disparity in sewage spills. I also find it fascinating that we've certainly heard many of the reasons that have been given by the industry as to the issues. Some of the anomalies in the individual sewage treatment works, I think, deserve further scrutiny. And just to pick one out, Fairfield, which I think is North Herts. In 2019, it didn't have any sewage spills. In 2020, that went up to 273, so that's 10 hours this is. In 2021, 243, so about the same time. And then 2022 dropped down to 150. These anomalies can't just be explained by vagaries in the weather. The figures in Barkway do a similar thing. They go up and down without any reasonable reasoning. So I think what we have to acknowledge is the connection between increases in customers and therefore revenue and the lack of investment in infrastructure at a local level. Turning to abstraction, the industry and the Chiltern Society and Doug Kennedy, who appeared earlier, put great play in putting together a chalk stream strategy. And the industry joined Charles Rangeley Wilson, and the whole area of abstraction was looked at. And that was the first time really that a lot of the river groups were able to get hold of decent abstraction figures. But the consensus of the report and the findings of the report is that 10% is the maximum that can be abstracted from a chalk stream catchment without it damaging a chalk stream. I've just pulled out 4. The Rib and the Quin have 33% of their rainfall recharge abstracted. Very small population, and yet 33% of our recharge is abstracted. So that's 23% over what the recommendation is from that thing. The Bean runs at 40%. One might argue that the town of Stevenage is in that catchment, so maybe there's a lot of people there, but even so, 40%, so that's 30% over. The Mimram, 13%, drops quite low in the Mimram for some reason. And the figures weren't in the original report, but I know the Revival team have managed to get the abstraction report done for their catchment. And I believe the number was at 43%, which is one of the highest abstraction levels in the country. So the abstraction that's going on is excessive. It's damaging the chalk streams. And over a long period of time, the industry has not addressed the infrastructure and needs of the population. A lot about the plans. The plans, just to highlight, the Upper Lee will receive abstraction reductions in the period 2040 to 2045 by the figures just given by Claire. So you and I, Steve, will be long gone.
Well, I think I mean, you raised some interesting points there, and there are clearly some areas where there has been significant over abstraction. I think, I mean, I'm slightly encouraged by the fact that I think that there is a recognition that there wasn't in many circles until relatively recently, that's not a satisfactory position. And I would clearly like to see it dealt with faster. But the fact it's been going to be dealt with at all is you know, a small step in the right direction. Yeah, I think we clearly have to recognise that that the water companies have a need to continue to provide water to people. We do need to encourage them to use a great deal less of it, because I think the per head consumption in Hertfordshire is probably one of the highest in the country. But there is a need to change the way in which it's supplied, and I think the council needs to continue to keep the pressure on the water industry to move as fast as it can on that, and to challenge if we think it's not going as fast as would be possible, and to look at what local interventions are possible in advance of some of the things that are inevitably going to take longer. I mean, I think he raised some really interesting questions about variations in performance of individual, mainly small rural sewage works, and Fairfield was the worst one year and Whitwell the next. I don't know whether or not there's a simple explanation for that. I suspect there may not be. I don't know, Tim, you just want to say anything quickly about that?
I think, well, yeah, I'm happy to go away and look at kind of the site by site and the data in more detail. You're right, there are local complexities behind some of these figures. it is hard to give a broad brush approach as to kind of the trends that happen over time. Loosely, they are linked to weather, as I said. Growth, as in population growth, is actually quite minor. We're seeing the spills predominantly during rainfall or directly preceding it. So following it, sorry. So yes, climate change and weather patterns and change in weather is linked as the primary cause.
I mean, I think it would be, there are some cases where there's particular local issues that I think it might be worth exploring. I mean, not in this meeting. I know I happen to represent Western, and I know there are some particular local issues there, but there is a desire to explore both in terms of how surface water is getting into the system and what happens to it. So I think that's perhaps something where there's some scope to get the community involved, because there may be things which the community can influence. So I hope that and the examples I've come up with are Thames ones, but there's probably one Anglian ones in there within the district as well. So it would be good to keep in contact with you about those sort of issues, and see what we can do. And clearly there's a piece of investment required in order to make your network more resilient, and reduce, if not completely eliminate, those sort of discharges. But what the community can do in terms of making marginal changes that might have an impact much more quickly, I think is worth exploring. Okay, well, thanks very much for everyone's inputs this evening. I think that was some useful discussions. There's clearly some progress is being made, but there's clearly a lot more to be made. So thank you very much for your participation, and those of you who come to these regularly, we will be in touch to notify you about what we're going to cover in detail on the sustainable development discussion in the September meeting. So thanks very much and good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.